Welcome to Cut Daisies and Unicorns, and Phil and Steve are still in the studio, and this is episode number 9.
9? Holy cow.
Yeah, it seems like we've flown through season 4 here.
Well, we are two guys.
Two guys flying
through the universe. Yeah.
Right.
And with our feet on the ground.
Right.
And our heads in the air.
Yeah, so we're we've had this thing in the last couple of times where we've done a couple of episodes at a time in a sitting.
Yeah.
And we're once again doing that again today. So if you're thinking, some reason it looks like Phil and Steve are wearing the same thing that they wore last week, that's the reason why, everybody. Because we are wearing the same thing that we were wearing last week.
I still smell clean.
Right.
I put on the essence of cobalt today.
The essence of cobalt.
Hey, you know what was really cool?
Yeah.
So, back to Des Moines, and one of the reasons I was back was to perform a ceremony, wedding ceremony for lovely friends of my daughter and my son, Earl and Tiffany. And Earl's best friend from, like, growing up, Patrick, was there. Oh my gosh, Phil. Can we take just a parenthetical brief aside?
Okay.
And talk about the beauty of people.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of times I come across as this cynical, old, dying dude who just is so tired of life. But, oh my word, it was awesome because I got out of my known circle and got to meet, like, other people that are really tight in their own circles. And Patrick is just this beautiful soul. Oh my gosh. And what's so crazy is both Earl and Patrick don't have memories of not having each other in their life before kindergarten. Like, their parents were in friend groups or whatever, and then they went to kindergarten, and then they grew up together through elementary school, and they were just tight buds. And Patrick is a singer, and he said that his guitar, like, he enjoys playing guitar, but he wouldn't consider himself a guitar player.
Yeah.
But oh man, this kid, beautiful person, and his girlfriend Victoria, they were lovely to be able to get to know. But we were post the ceremony. We were waiting for them to turn over the event space to be able to get down and sit down for our meal. And I was introducing Patrick to Amy, and then all of a sudden, in an ADHD or an ADD kind of way, he just starts smelling the air. He's like, I feel like there is, like, I'm smelling someone wafting patchouli. Like, I feel like I'm back in Oregon, which is where he's originally from.
Right.
And I just smiled. And Victoria, his girlfriend, was like, that's not patchouli. There's something else going on here, but that's not patchouli. And I just smiled, and I'm like, well, actually, what you're smelling is the essence of cobalt. Mm-hmm. And he's like, you have an essence? I said, yes, I do. Mm-hmm. I said, and as much as you're right, Patrick, Victoria is more right. Because my mix right now on the essence is stronger in frankincense than it is patchouli. Mm-hmm. And so, kudos to him for the nostril smelling and, and.
But it's funny, the sense that get dominant for some people over like patchouli was one that he pulled out, which it is in there.
Yeah.
And but yeah, there's other ones.
It's kind of like when people say, hey, Coble, when you sing, you sound like Neil Young. Mm-hmm. Well, the reason why, like, what they're hearing is what they know of Neil Young, right? I don't sound like Neil Young. I sound like Steve Coble, But what he was smelling is what he knew the most of.
Right.
And yet, a woman whose sense of smell might be a little more discerning, then she's like, yeah, is that really what I smell? And I'm like, see, that's the truth. It's right there.
Duping the senses right there.
Right there, yeah. And then, I didn't even talk to you about this in our little chat the other day. I was at Friedrich's Coffee, and there was a gentleman there who whose beard was about another third longer than mine. ZZ Top-esque.
Yeah.
I mean, people talk to me about being ZZ Top. I don't have a ZZ Top beard.
No.
And I'm going more for Gandalf. Well, Gandalf's is even longer, but I would rather be a Gandalf figure than a ZZ Top figure. And but this gentleman's name was John. And as I got my coffee, I saw him. I'm like, "Hey, dude, nice beard," and just went over to engage with him. Well, little did I know that I was probably staring in the mirror of someone that I will become. 64-year-old gentleman, mystic collage of study and knew his stuff. Working in the field of mental health and addiction.
Yeah.
And just really, really interesting in an individual. So, hey, the world's full of people. And not all people are bad.
Right.
That's what we just need to remember.
Right.
That's
and it goes back to our, either optimistic or pessimistic view. Is that most of the time we're expecting people to be bad. We're expecting to see the bad side, and because we have seen it. I mean, everybody has. If you've been alive long enough, you've seen the bad side of humanity.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, I'm not saying everybody, but sarcastic fellows like us sometimes think about already automatically seeing the bad side of people and thinking that that's going to be the outcome of whatever interaction that we're going to encounter. So I'm glad to hear tales of good humans.
Yeah, it can happen, and I think that's the part where when we talked. Probably 2 episodes ago, and we were talking about like how the pandemic has changed individuals, and then we ask ourselves, or you even asked me like, hey, how have you changed, through the pandemic and stuff like that. It's in those situations that, for whatever reason, I almost jumped in the car. I almost grabbed my keys, jumped in the car, and went down to Friedrich. Literally, this is a 1.5 drive, right? But in my head, I was like, I got to take care of my time and got to, keep focused and blah, 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 blah. And then I thought, you know what? If my spaceship has a loading dock, I'm not going to be able to travel away from the 42nd Street property for very much longer in the future. So I'm like, I'm going to enjoy the walk. And just like today, I'm wearing my flip-flops because it's a beautiful day. I put on my flip-flops, and I knew it was going to be crisp outside, but I'm like, I'm going to have a hot coffee in my hand walking back. This is all going to work out. And but it was in that moment, because I was traveling by foot,
right,
that I, got to meet someone new and have a conversation. And he asked me for my email address and my phone number. And so, it's just one of those things where, those conversations could be able to happen. And so, yeah, I walked away from those experiences with my heart full of the good in humanity and what's out there. And so, I would just say in the past experience of the spirit of Thanksgiving, look around at the people that are in your life and be thankful for, the good that does come out of them.
Yeah, it's a good perspective. Good reminder for all of us.
Take a chuckle at what's funny,
right,
whether it's funny or not. And, then, just be able to, wash away. I think I have a really weird view. There are cultural rituals that when you engage with them, they become iconic remembrances. So, again, for, when you go to a wedding, it's something. For some people, weddings aren't a good memory,
Right.
because of, how relationships ended up. When you go to a baptism, in our faith background, when there's a baptism, it's also a testimony for the remembrance of your baptism, right?
Right.
I do that with the shower every day.
There you go.
I figure, actually a quote from Cowboy Bebop
Yeah.
is one of the guys comes out and he's like, "There's no hot water. How come this thing is broke?" And the girl looks at him and like, "Well, I'm pretty sure that's my problem, because shower, bath, shower is a real thing." And I'm like, "Shower, bath, shower?" She's like, "You can't like just jump into a bathtub in all of your dirt and grime and just be like hanging out, simmering in your own cesspool of what you picked up from out there. So you take a shower, then you jump into the bathtub and you soak, you relax,
Yeah.
and then you get out and then you rinse off from what you did leave in the bathtub."
Yeah.
I'm like, shower, bath, shower.
Which is the reason why I don't like baths, so that makes sense.
Well, and you know what? I can't remember the last time. We're not even going to spend time thinking about the last time I took a bath. And so, but I mean, just, yeah, with that, just as the water washes down, I'm like, well, Lord, you know what? And actually, like today, I didn't have any like negative self-thought about poor decisions from yesterday. I was just like, man, what a great day in the studio. I got 10 hours in the pottery studio. I've got, I'm building mugs galore for coffee consumption. Consumers can consume coffee cups for consumption. And, looking at all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, anytime the water's washing down on you, it's washing away. It's just a picture of the redeeming graces that are poured out. Or as the sacred texts say, new mercies every day, which is actually the withholding of what we deserve, and which goes into why everybody thinks God's a like white-haired God with a lightning bolt,
Right.
Zeus or Thor.
Right.
Grecian theology raging upon religiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently I'm on a roll right now.
You are.
Oh, my word.
Keep rolling.
Humanity.
Rolling.
So topic 4, I can't believe this is the 39th episode.
Right.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. We're one away from a whole year of podcasting.
We are.
Mm-hmm.
New good thoughts coming in for great ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Last week, we talked about movies.
We did.
We did a review of the movie Dune.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to share together the different our different favorites.
Mm.
I loved your list.
Oh, good.
I did. I'm like, oh my word. Yeah, these are good things to remember. Yeah. And so if you're wondering what to watch when it comes to science fiction,
There's a great list.
check out season 4,
Episode 8.
8. Yep. Episode 8 it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Check it out. And man, I think that you'll just really, really enjoy that conversation.
Yeah. And there's then also what we encouraged is you to add your own so that, because we're always interested in pulling up new films we haven't seen, things that we don't know about.
Uh-huh.
So add your list. And we also sneak previewed saying, hey, we're going to talk about movies and sci-fi, and this week we're going to talk about music.
Today,
Because music's a big theme in the Cut Daisies and Unicorns realm.
yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, it's twofold.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was from watching a movie
Right.
that sparked our interest
Right.
in talking about music.
Mm-hmm.
And that movie is
Jagged,
Jagged.
which is a documentary.
Yep.
Jagged Little Pill.
Released in the 2021 at the Toronto International Film Festival on September 13th,
Yeah.
2021.
Yeah, and so Steve was watching it, or had finished watching it, and you texted, "Hey, I think you and Caitlin would enjoy it." And I was like, "We just watched it."
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I enjoyed the documentary because Jagged Little Pill is one of the, like, I love that album. And it was it was kind of the time frame of, grunge and things that were happening, and then you get a female voice like Alanis Morissette or Alanis Morissette, and
Yeah.
all, and it does, there's a lot of angst there as well. So it kind of fits a lot of what's happening. People said that that she's angry, but I don't think it's anger. I think it's angst. And I don't think angst has to be angry. But it's one of those albums that, I mean, it's, to me, there's a lot of different dynamics that are happening in that album. I mean, like, even topic-wise. You ought to know is the one that they always point back to, where she is angry. There is a relationship that went awry, and so there is some anger as well displayed there. But I feel like so that's one that there's anger. I mean, but when you're looking at other parts of the album, like things like Ironic and, like, there's no anger there. I mean, she's talking, isn't it ironic? Or, I mean, it's just a lot of great content on that album, which I think they said was, like, it's still, like, top 3 albums, by a female, as far as record sales, and I think, as you pointed out, like, trying to find the vinyl for that now, it's hard to find the vinyl of Jagged Little Pill.
Yeah, yeah. I just, some people who have record players, they're like trying to build their library, and so, like, the volume of albums to purchase, become the goal.
Right.
And I'm moved more into, I have enough records that I'm not playing, but am glad that are in my collection for when I'm in the mood to play, then I can, have them available.
Right.
But then as I go down the path, I'm looking for some iconic things to be able to pull off the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought, man, this would be a really, really iconic. This is an iconic album, and I don't think that I've ever sat down and listened to the whole thing through. I know the different songs.
Right.
Actually, performed Hand in My Pocket as a solo artist. It always made people laugh because Alanis, saying that, and me, I just like saying, I'm flipping you the peace sign. And so, anyway.
Yeah, but some of that I didn't recognize, which, I mean, and just to be able to note that, yes, she has come out and said, like, she doesn't necessarily support that documentary because she felt like there were some things that were told that weren't true, but then she also didn't necessarily say what was told that wasn't true. So there's some of that that's kind of in the, it's going to be left in the mystery of things. But I still felt like the documentary was good. And I liked her telling her story now, as she even looked back on her life and some of the things that were happening there. And then that, the part, I think you mentioned it at the end of the documentary, where she's got her daughter and she's singing there, in that, mic, and you can, her daughter's kind of like, well, what are you doing? Like, what's happening here?
Yeah, it just really, really beautiful. What I enjoyed was that you got to see her look backwards. The album was released in '95, and so if everybody can fly back in the universe, and timeline. And, like when I think of 1995, it gives me pause, just for the sake of, man, I was just starting out my path on being a dad. Michaela and Micah, and, back in that day, and yet, to put it in context for, like, in the whole world, Kurt Cobain died in 94. And so you've got, to your point, concerning grunge, and you've got West Coast and what's going on, from Seattle and the grunge scene.
Right.
It just is really, really interesting. And, man, you just can't argue with... Here is a singer-songwriter, and we'll get down the road and talk about some other things that will play a part. But Dolly Parton's quote on that was, it's about these songs, and from the Nashville arena, it's songs that tell the story, or in country, or in old country, and you don't always get the combination of a songwriter having the voice that is able. And I think, mentioned before, but I'll bring back to the forefront, Chris Stapleton was a songwriter long before he was ever a performer. But here, somewhere, him smoking Marlboros and drinking whiskey brought his voice to a place where, as a performer and guitar player, just incredible. Now, Alanis, you see her plunking away on, like, some keyboard stuff or guitar or whatever, but she, when it came to performing for the concerts, they just, like, built this band around her, and she was there to focus vocally and focus on performance. And I can, quite frankly, really identify, because there's been situations when I've been able to not play but have people who are playing the music around the song I'm singing. It gives you a freedom as a vocalist, instead of having to focus on all the different parts and stuff like that.
Yeah, and so the band that surrounded was, like a familiar name, which I didn't know he even was the drummer for that tour, was Taylor Hawkins.
Yeah. And what's interesting is when it comes to the recorded version, Taylor wasn't on the recording.
Right.
But Taylor Hawkins got picked up, and it's funny because in that documentary, then the bass player in the band wasn't even supposed to be the guy who they had wanted to come in to play bass.
Right.
But then it was cool when the band around him was like, well, he's good. He's a jazz bass player or whatever. But you know what? Then they threw Soundgarden at him. And they're like, hey, listen to all this stuff. This is the stuff you're going to need on this tour. Yeah. And so
then a lot of that grunge influence from the things that they were, putting at him, he's like, oh, yeah, I love this. And yeah, so if you're, the Taylor Hawkins became the drummer for Foo Fighters.
Yeah.
Which, if you know, Foo Fighters was started by Dave Grohl, which was the drummer for Nirvana, which is then the blend of and together of what happened. So Nirvana ended when Kurt Cobain died. And whether some people like to say suicide, some people like to say murder.
Well, what we do know, at least to the best of our ability, of what we may know, is we're not throwing Kurt Cobain into that he might still be living.
Oh no,
in South America.
I don't believe anybody says that.
I mean, we don't have an Elvis sighting going on
no
here.
Elvis, no Tupac, no Capone. He's not with them on that island. But there is some conspiracy that is surrounding that, whether it was murder or suicide. But
yeah,
lots of documentaries on that. Montage of Heck, I think, is on HBO. There's a bunch of other documentaries that were done of that kind of surround some of those elements when it comes to it, which is the reason why, I mean, I found this fun, kind of interesting with Dave Grohl. And after his death, Kurt Cobain's death, is that, you know, like him and Chris, who was Nirvana. Dave Grohl was just like, he wanted to just get away, and he tried to find the most remote place on Earth. So he went to like Ireland, somewhere in the hills, and he was trying to separate himself from that like Nirvana thing. And he says that he was driving along, and there was he was in the middle of nowhere, and there's somebody who's walking on the road. And he sees the guy, and he's wearing a Kurt Cobain shirt.
Wow.
And he's like, and that's when I realized, like, I don't need to escape this.
Yeah.
He's like, because one, I'm never going to be able to escape it.
Right.
Like, it's always going to be a part of me.
Yeah.
Now, he doesn't always, you know, and they don't play, like, you know, he doesn't play Nirvana songs now, even in as a Foo Fighter.
Right.
And the Foo Fighters just inducted into the Hall of Fame, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame recently, this past induction class. But
I love the idea of a Rock and Roll Hall of Flame.
Hall of Flame. But to me, I think that also comes into play when he's considering what's next. So that's when he came back from that, you know, like trying to get away from it and realizing he can't. The Foo Fighters' first album, called Foo Fighters, was written and performed all by Dave Grohl. He did every single instrument.
Yeah.
I mean, it was him alone, just saying, this is something I want to get out. This is something that's in me. And he kind of willed it into existence. Like, I'm going to make sure that this is what's going to be out there. And that was before he added Taylor and Pat, and much later, 2017, you know, he added their last guy. But it's just that interesting kind of, you know, bringing together, and you know, Taylor was just had finished up Jagged Little Pill tour. I think it was like an 18-month tour. And I think that's when he heard Foo Fighters was looking for a drummer.
Yeah,
so.
And so going back to Jagged, then there was some, to quote Alana, she was like, hey, once we all got figured out that we weren't going to be having romantic relationships and, you know, we weren't going to be messing around and stuff like that, she goes like, yeah, just laid it down and said this is the way it is, and, you know, no hanky-panky going on tour together.
Right.
And while that was one of the themes of that's what made the band work out okay, then the guys come out in the conversation, and they're like, here we are on this tour, and we have this woman's voice, you know, singing about the angst and, you know, abusive situations and, you know, the... you know, I mean, basically, I mean, like it's an album that's hashtag Me Too back in the 90s, right?
Right.
And so you've got that, and he goes, and then like we're just all being dogs, you know, we're in the band, and then women are coming to these shows, and you know, then we're doing the whole rock and roll thing, and
we're capitalizing.
You know, I love the part that Taylor was included in the documentary, and I loved also then it was a transition for whatever was happening while Dave was going through his metamorphosis. I mean, we're talking about, you know, in that transition of, you know, 94, Kurt dies, 95, Alanis lets Jagged Little Pill out. They get her ready for going on tour. Oh, that's another highlight from Jagged. She got signed with Madonna's label that was this couture, you know, like specialty label where she's like, I'm taking special interest in whatever. And, you know, and so, I mean, everybody's freaking out because Madonna's there. And Madonna in 1995, she's been running for a decade, easy, decade plus, as an incredible singer, rock star, producer, you know, and things like that. But just find it interesting that when Taylor got pulled away from Foo, that put a hole in the synergy of what was going on with the band.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and the Foo Fighters, the self-titled album came out in 95 as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I mean, it was a little bit less known. I mean, I think their major, like most well-known, The Color and the Shape, came out in 97, which is when band members were already then present. So, but yeah, so I mean, people still recognize numbers from 95, but I think their most popular album was The Color and the Shape, so if I'm not mistaken. So lots of things that were happening in that whole realm. I mean, they even call Foo Fighters a post-grunge, you know, looking at genre, and so it's like post-grunge, because I would say that I would put them more in a rock and roll category than a grunge category, but they would still, some people still call them hard rock or grunge, and I'm like, huh. You know, so to me, their sound is a little bit different from what is categorized, you know, even from Nirvana, you know, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, some of the actual grunge era, you know, known bands. But
yeah, and you know what, we would really have to. I think we'd have to talk to somebody like Mike Lauer to give us,
right.
You know,
Mike Lauer's a good source.
Like just a good sense of. I remember first listening to Foo and just thinking that they were like too hard rock for me to really enjoy. And then it would be argued that I just didn't have ears for it at the time. Now, I think it's my personal interest in Dave Grohl that ends up moving me into, oh, this is going on, you know. And it's really weird because we were talking about this on Monday as far as where we were going with the podcast and stuff. And Everlong, I mean, like Dave doing Everlong acoustic only.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a
good one.
That's a version, right? And then when you take a look at Sound City is a documentary on Foo Fighters, directed by Dave Grohl. And man, that is the one that really let me get set up with Foo and what Dave Grohl was about. And I would say if you want to get a good, like the Tom Petty documentary is super, super good. But you get to hear these stories, you know, of the layers. And it's more Dave Grohl's like personal story about from Nirvana to becoming Foo and, you know, some writing and stuff like that. Where Sonic Highways then starts out with Dave saying, hey, we've been Foo Fighters for 20 years. And so, like, Dave's thinking, we need to figure out as a band how we're going to, like, put the spark back into the songwriting and with what's going on. And so Sonic Highways is them going to notable spots around the country to be able to put together songs. And they go, their first stop is in Chicago, and they write a song. And basically the task at hand is we have 1 week, and from start to finish, we're going to write a song. And then what they do is in the documentary or in the series, then they do historic interviews with historic musicians And even though I went in to see like what would it take to own or rent that, because it was published first on HBO.
Mm-hmm.
It's currently not available on HBO,
I was wondering that.
which is seems very odd with their content and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But for whatever reason, so I just ended up buying it. I'm like, you know what? I know this is going to be great to have in the background and and stuff like that. But from what they do, it's just amazing. Well, so interesting. Then, the first place that Dave stops off at with the band Foo Fighters is he stops off at there. I got it now. He stops. They come to Chicago. Mm-hmm. Which Chicago, for most, if you don't know, Chicago, since it's like second city, it's like it back in the day, in the fight for the World's Fair, it was, New York City and Chicago was fighting to become a preeminent hub in the United States. And so, but Chicago also connected by railway and the Great Lakes. So a lot of shipping from the west to the east would take place with people bringing in lamb, sheep, cattle. There's the stockyards, and then of course there's that one book out in regards to the slaughterhouses in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And all of that. But a lot of the blues players would come up from the south, mm-hmm. and they would navigate out of the south up through, and whether it was Nashville and then St. Louis or Kansas City, but Chicago was a place. And so anyway, Chicago was the first episode in this series called Sonic Highways. Mm-hmm. Well, where did they land? The recording studio that they landed at was Steve Albany's studio in Chicago. Mm-hmm. Guess who was the engineer for Nirvana?
Was it him?
Yeah. So Steve Albany, who's a punk rocker, but he worked with. And he is the founder, owner, and principal engineer of Electro Audio, which is in Chicago. He estimates that he's worked on several thousand albums over his career, but noted acts as Nirvana, the Pixies, the Breeders, and PJ Harvey. Mm. And so, which a lot of people who know punk know about the Pixies. Mm-hmm. And oh my word, the depth of just like these. I mean, he was an incredible Albany's work. He worked on In Utero, by Nirvana. Yeah,
which is very punk.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that would be the super grind. I mean, even though Nevermind is I would say their most popular, but In Utero is, there's definitely a lot of grunge punk on there. So,
yeah.
And
so interestingly, Dave, in his younger life, as a child, mm-hmm. He had a cousin who lived in Evanston. Now, can you imagine in, I don't know, late 80s, early 90s, being a parent that would let a 14-year-old take her two male cousins, hop on the L in Evanston, and come into Wrigley and go to Club Cubbies?
Right. Yeah. It's interesting.
I mean, right. But definitely that was the start of Dave Grohl's, like, when you hear Dave Grohl as a drummer and that he's, in grunge out on the West Coast, Dave Grohl grew up in Virginia.
Right. And so his family, so his dad was he was a flautist. I mean, and he apparently was a really great flautist, but his dad knew, like, I can't make money in, making music.
Right.
Which then he put on Dave later on. But his dad then became a speech writer for Republican candidates.
Really?
Yeah. So he's like, but what's so weird is that his mom was a school teacher who, as he calls her, very liberal school teacher.
Yeah.
So I wonder, which is the reason why, his parents were divorced early on, because their philosophy, their ideologies did not match up, and there was a lot of arguing based on that.
On ideology.
Right? Yeah.
Wow.
So there was a long time that his dad would be just like, you're not going to make any money.
Yeah.
Which is then funny because you pulled up his Dave Grohl's net worth, which is like, what did you say, $325 million or something? Well, Dad, guess what? He just made some money.
And Dave, in our research about Dave's net worth, people were like, well, I mean, he was in Nirvana. And actually, Dave gets currently 12.5% of the royalties that is the band's cut from the sales.
Yeah.
But they're like, that contribution does not represent, like, that doesn't make up the majority of his current net worth. Now, like, I think Dave was smart enough as a businessman, and saw how the industry worked. Like, on all of this stuff that's film, he's director producer.
Mm-hmm.
Dave is a 1%er of 1%ers. I mean, he's a very, very talented individual, and I think that that's the part. But one of my favorite quotes, which is very invigorating for me, like, really, I'm so glad that we've done these last two episodes the way we have, because it with us having kind of like a target to shoot at,
right?
Like, just then with research and formation, we're just not shooting from the hip, kind of like, oh, we're going to make shit up. What conspiracy theory do you want to talk about? We can create distrust in everyone's utopianism, But one of the quotes that I heard in the first 3 episodes of Sonic Highways was somebody was like, hey, you know what? All the greats, they're not there for you to live in their shadow. And they're not there to be feared. What those people are there to inspire. If you talk to any of them, I mean, and sure, there's people who are dicks, okay?
Right.
But
yeah,
I think
meet your heroes.
Yeah, you got to be real careful about that. But I think that one of the things that I found comforting and invigorating was, you know what? Coble, you don't have to worry about how it's not going to be good enough or that it's not going to work out. And so, like, if there are artists listening to this, I'm thinking of one female specifically who does listen to our podcast. Mm-hmm. Don't be afraid of what you put out isn't going to work. Don't be afraid of what you're creating isn't good enough. Ultimately, there's no one else's voice that could do what you can do. Mm-hmm. So go for it. Put that stuff down.
Yeah. And it takes me back to a Foo Fighters song, and it's one of my probably top 5 Foo Fighters songs, but it's called Best of You.
Huh.
And he asked the question, is somebody getting the best of you? Or are you still trying to be able to kind of form it and piece it together, or are you flying through life kind of ignoring the things around you? I mean, like, is someone getting the best of you? And I always, I talk about that one quite a bit, but I feel like it's a good question to be able to ask of yourself, and I think that's what music does, and especially ones that actually have lyrical content that you can engage with, is that it asks a question, the best, the best, the best. I mean, is someone getting the best of you? And I think it's philosophically, like that's a great question to be able to consider. Is someone getting the best of you?
Yeah.
And you were just saying putting out stuff, and like you can say like, I don't know, this may not, especially for perfectionists, right? Like somebody's like, no, this isn't the best. Like, but if it's a part of you, and you're saying, I want to get this out, and I may not be like, put it out. Like this still could be the best parts of you.
Yeah.
And if you're not sharing it, then people aren't getting the best of you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I don't know. To me, it's very reflective. It probably is a part of the climate shutdown of us moving from fall into winter. At the end of the year, I get reflective because I look backwards, and then I do fill up my bucket of hope for what plans does the future year have to hold. I've found a great clarity in documenting and writing down my thoughts about that. So whether it's in reflection, oh hey, like I'll spend time and write down, this is what went well in 2021. This is what didn't go well in 2021. And that's even with my blind spots, right?
Mm-hmm. And everybody has them.
Yep. And so that's with my blind spots, but I'm doing that. And so then, I move into, all right, here's what I'd like to do. This is what I want to at least work toward. And I remember one of the turning points in the Earthen Warehouse studio was when I was like, all right, now I got to stop playing this like a hobby. I need to work toward this. This is workable goals of, something that could turn into a sustainable business. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I started setting my alarm and getting up and going and doing that work. And, and then I had this thing in me that came back alive in regards to, oh, I like to work. And so, like, then it wasn't, oh, I'm going to, maybe this will happen, maybe that'll happen, And I remember that, like, there was one week, like, after a couple months of making pottery, I had 30 pieces, right? And then I remember talking about that in 1 week, I made 15 pieces. Well, now, having gone through that round of getting stuff ready, I've been a day and a half in the studio because I haven't been feeling well, just came back from the trip, all of this stuff. But I set my alarm. I'm like, all right, I'm going to do this. A day and a half, made 10 coffee mugs. Well, I mean, so it's that thing, but where did that start from? It started from me setting a goal and saying, this is what I'm going to do. So maybe someone's a poet out there, but they're just kind of, I'm writing some poetry. Hey, but what would it mean for you to put together a collection of your poetry and make it available? And if you're a poet out there and you've got stuff, put it together in a way where you could be able to get it out there, and we'll be glad to tell our listeners about your work of art, and and then it's even on the ideas of songwriting. That's something that I've totally let slip through my fingers. I have not worked toward that. 2022 is going to have a different goal, when it comes to that. And as far as me personally, and that's not laying down. I'm going to stop working the studio stuff. You and I were talking the other day about quality of life. There's some other parts of discerning being driven for the sake of what others think about you versus what is the quality of life that I'm going to pursue in lieu of what is best for my family and how I act in that way for family, with family, and on whether it's my immediate family, extended family, and how that fits together. But gosh, I mean, there's such inspiration that when we're taking this stuff in, that I just found, fascinating. And you do, like, I think that there's a bounce between these two artists that, like Foo Fighters and Morissette both have influenced you pretty heavily, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that there's others, and they may not be on the top of the list,
Sure.
but still, I mean, like, you listen to music from a side of what is this creative? How is this creative being a prophet of our current day?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I feel like there's a lot that, I mean, of course, the music, and there's all of the, especially when you get into more of the pop realm. I mean, like, they have all of these, like, diagrams, and they've got a whole science of, like, well, what's going to catch people's attention, and
Sure.
what's the current day kind of, like, all of that stuff. Like, I feel like they're trying to get people's attention just by the music, which the music's good. I'm not saying that.
Right.
But, like, sometimes you also need to look at the content.
Yeah.
Look at what people are speaking. What are they saying? And there's a lot of great content that you don't want to miss out on.
Right.
And it can be across the board. There's some of the stuff, even if I may not like the music or I may not like the art, like, there's still some good content. Like, lyrically, speaking. And so we need to pay attention, which is also the reason why, I mean, singer-songwriters
Yeah.
it's a great realm for people to, especially if you're into a lot of lyrical content. People are telling a story. People are trying to speak something into existence that that it's on their heart, that's on their life, that they're like, I need to speak about this. I need to talk about it, which is where we talk about cultural prophets. They're speaking things and saying whether something's not right or something's wrong, and I'd like to point out that it's wrong.
Right.
Like, those are all, I mean, just great genres of things that we need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Like, people are speaking, which is protest songs of the 60s, the Vietnam era protest songs.
Yeah.
That became it's like a whole genre in and of itself.
Yeah.
And they're like, we're talking about this because we don't like what's happening.
Yeah.
And we want to point it out. And there were so many things about, I think the loss of that. I mean, people have still tried to make protest songs, but some of it's and some of it's good still. Pointing out things that aren't good, and so pay attention. Pay attention to what people are saying too, not just the music behind it, which can be catchy, or sometimes you're saying, well, that it doesn't grab me. The music doesn't grab me. Well, listen to what they're speaking then, because it actually might help you to connect more when you understand what they're saying.
Yeah.
Because that's important.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is the reason why I started getting into more singer-songwriter versus just, like, ooh, that's a bop, or, that's,
Yeah.
like, the music's catchy, right? Okay, but let's pay attention more what people are saying too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in complete agreement. I just knew that was a view of where I don't know that I necessarily considered it that way until you and I had a conversation about it. And so that's the part where I come back to, and like, there is some really cool stuff to be able to learn from these people in the words that they are sharing and they are singing. I'm amazed at Grohl's ability when he's in a city, that he's pulling all of this information that he has researched and the people in the conversations, and he boils it all down, and so that comes out in Nashville when he's talking with Dolly and other people. I think interestingly too, Alanis is from Canada.
Yeah, right.
Like one of the bands she opened up for was Neil Young. Again, a Canadian, a reference to Canada as well, and we mentioned last week about loonies and cryptocurrency. So I mean, like just throwing that all out there in regards to what's going on. But yeah, Jason Isbell has a great song. That he really calls out. I mean, it is a hey, by the way, white men pay attention, because this has really been about power and control so long that we've been stepping on the heads of others in a bad way. It was very indicting. And people have come up. I think that COVID has allowed for some people. What is Neil Ratliff and
The Night Sweats?
Yeah. He's got the new song out, Survivor. And again, when I first heard it, I wasn't Nathaniel Ratliff. I wasn't necessarily a fan for two things. I wasn't a fan from the production side because it was starting to get really produced. And me personally, I like it still undeveloped. You know, I'm Wilco at heart. But
Jeff Tweedy.
Yes, but you come back, and I mean, I think if you listen to that song, you will find that that is a protest of our current environment song. Sting came out with a new song. I mean, like there's so much of this new stuff dropping right now. Lumineers is going to be in town a couple nights from now, sponsored by XRT. You know, I wish I could have gotten a free ticket to that, but oh well. I suppose you have to. What I noticed is they're like, hey, we'll take the 10th caller. Nobody ever sells the number. There's no, they never give out the freaking phone number to be able to call for this thing. Uh-huh. But I'm looking forward to that album. And again, taking it in and being able to hear. So, man, music influence. And I think there's a beautiful thing that when you start connecting all these dots on the people who are connected to this and that's what stirred our conversation. We're like, Taylor was a drummer for Alanis?
Right.
Holy cow, Foo. And being able to get into that. And yet Dave Grohl has worked his little booty off to get and to do now. When you start seeing or hearing and you watch this documentary stuff on Grohl and the Foo Fighters, and I would seriously say, if you're going to do something, because there's another movie for the Foo that's coming out.
Yeah.
But if you're going to start somewhere, start with Sound City. Start there, because that's basically an autobiographical work on Dave Grohl. And then when you see the historic, iconic stuff coming together, it's just fantastic. This kind of stuff makes me think of Chris Fordyce that we had as an interview. And if you wonder about where to go, I think it was a Fringe episode. It was probably our second Fringe episode, season 2. Look for Doc Fordyce, Chris Fordyce as an interviewee. Dude's all about peace, love, togetherness. But I mean, this guy's like Mr. Solder Iron. But that's the thing that comes out in Sonic Highways, is how many of these people were like building these engineer rooms, and they were doing it point to point with like, hey, here's the schematic, and this is what you need to do to be able to build this stuff, and we're on the consumer side with what do we know? It's kind of like the first time you take somebody from the city up to the farm and they see a cow and they're like, what's that? And it's like, that's your hamburger.
Yeah, but what I like about Sonic Highways then, out of, I agree with you, start Sound City, but Sonic Highways, you kind of see like Dave Grohl's like love of music.
Oh,
I mean, and that's a great thing for you to consider is like the, artists are also fans,
yeah.
right? And he's a big fan of music, and you can see from every city. One of my favorite ones was when he was in New Orleans, and they were, talking about some of the, the great music that came, from New Orleans, Preservation Hall, and some of the things that were happening. One of the parts they were talking about the funeral dirge, right? So they would have funerals in there, and it would be a musical number, but they're on the way to the grave or the grave site. It would be soft and kind of very much bringing that sadness, but like going away from the grave, I mean, it was like, this is where, when the saints go marching in with, big numbers, brass and, drums and all kinds of stuff that were happening it was more that reflection of like, this is, the celebration of the life that was lived. And just bringing out those musical pieces in there that was one of I really liked that episode on Sonic Highways. So yeah. Some good stuff in there, but across that, I haven't seen every one of these. I looked up, the Foo Fighters documentaries. I haven't seen them all, but not all of them are available still either. So, but yeah, there is a new one that's supposed to be Amazon. So yeah,
times like these or times like those. Mm-hmm. It's a celebration of their 25th anniversary. Mm-hmm. So just like Sonic Highways was, here's our project for the 20th anniversary. 5 years later, and I would imagine with its release that it's going to get into, how things have changed and stuff like that. But yeah, and the thing about Alanis and Dave both as songwriters is just their melodicness. Mm-hmm. And like, man, if you're listening to Foo Fighters and it's big drums, it's lots of guitars and all of this stuff going on. And yet, man, that dude knows how to write a hook melody. Mm-hmm. And, just super, super. He also knows how to build. Like, as I'm listening to the songs that he's writing and stuff like that, mm-hmm. He really is a master conductor of the rock and roll orchestra that's going on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's, a lot of the songs, especially the more iconic ones that, top Everlong, Times Like These, My Hero, they all have those moments of like crescendo build and then kind of bringing it down and bringing it back up. It just takes you through like a roller coaster, like ups and downs. And it's I agree. Learning to fly. Learn to fly.
Yeah. So Taylor Hawkins' first name is really Oliver.
Oh, I did not know that.
Drumming Ollie. I like it.
Oliver.
Yeah. Oh, man.
I could see he could be like an Oliver Twist. A little orphan boy.
Yeah. So, and he, I should have known to look on this. He actually was with Alanis from 95 until 97. And he was with her on the Can't Not tour. And then...
Oh, so he went on a couple of tours then. And then, because 97 would have been when The Color and the Shape of Foo Fighters comes out in 97.
So Foo Fighters, after touring through the spring of 96, they entered Seattle studio. And Dave Grohl and drummer William Goldsmith, eventually causing Goldsmith to leave the band. There's a story in Sound City where when they got into the recording studio and stuff, Dave's done this with both drummers too, by the way. When they don't get the drums the way he wants the drums for the songs, he goes and records them.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's like, this is how I want you to play it. And, and you hear these guys tell a story about, well, yeah, that really pissed me off. But you are talking to Dave Grohl, who is the drummer for Nirvana. I mean, like, I feel like we're getting close to a dead horse here, but,
Right. But I mean, it just showed like he knew what he was talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's, and it's funny when people are talking about, some people have said to Dave, like, you're such a great drummer. And he's like, oh, I'm not a great drummer. I mean, come on, Dave, though. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, if you performed every instrument on the first Foo Fighters, you're able to be able to play a number, whether or not, he's saying, like, I mean, he also knows he can't go out and tour and play every instrument.
Wow.
So, but I mean, he is a good drummer, but yet at the same time, he also he loves Taylor being the drummer of the Foo Fighters.
Well, and Taylor has a great voice.
Yeah. And, Dave brings him out to sing usually at least once.
Yeah, and for me, when I saw Foo live,
mm-hmm.
Dave had strep, and his vocals were roached. I mean, just awful. And he lost his voice partway through the concert. And obviously, people have seen him on stage. I mean, he plays that beautiful blue guitar, and so his guitar has a part within the song, so he can be playing and whatever. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure over half of the concert, Taylor sang all the lead vocals on all the songs. And he's like, yeah, we could have called it off, but this is effing rock and roll, and we're gonna, blah 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 blah, And I'm like, I probably need to go see Foo one more time just to be able to hear Dave, But then I get into this whole thing where Foo's playing is usually like these big, massive gatherings of people.
Like Lollapalooza.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, and so.
But I remember the Broken Leg tour.
Yes.
I mean, and that kind of shows you also, like, this is rock and roll. Like, I mean, he falls off, and I think he fell off the stage or something. And, broke his leg. I mean, and he went back. They had to pause the show. And the doctor was like, yeah, like, you need to go to the hospital because there's some damage here. And he's like, all right, well, why can't we just, can't you just grab a cast and he's like, I don't carry casts around. I have to go and get a cast. And the guy was like, and if he's like, I could put you out there. He's like, but your foot might fall, like there's
right.
And he's like, well, can you hold it? And he was like joking with him, but then that doctor was out the rest of that state, and he held his foot
to
make sure it wasn't gonna fall off.
Oh my word.
And then he built a throne.
Yes.
And then that's the throne. I mean, he is now he was kind of the go-to guy, so Axl Rose used that throne when he also couldn't, when he was, first got back again with Guns N' Roses, and I think he also said that there's been like 2 other people that have used this throne, that he's just, because it also, apparently this throne has like laser lights and a smoke show, all that's attached to this chair, so... Like, that's rock and roll.
Oh my word.
Like, keep going.
Got to keep going.
Keep going.
Well, I know that there's been a little bit of controversy around Dave's attitude towards what happens. He's like, yeah, just write songs and go out and, play them and stuff like this. And everybody's like, well, yeah, you're Dave Grohl, But, like, I think it just shows up. I think this guy's work ethic is probably beyond superhuman. And And when he approached Taylor to come and play with Foo, he really didn't think Taylor was going to say yes because Alanis was blown up so much. But the thing that pulled Taylor over to Foo is that he really saw himself as a drummer for a rock and roll band, not a drummer for a solo artist.
Right.
And so, he dove in, and then just as a little roundabout, Dave had enough connection that Foo, how they started out, was opening up for Red Hot Chili Peppers. So,
wow.
But that's all networking. Yeah.
It is networking.
And you can say whatever you want. He probably, in the early years worked his butt off and, just took advantage of every opportunity that came his way.
Right.
But then there came a time where, he put his eggs in a basket and he said, we're going to give this a try. And now Foo is, for the last 25 years. But they keep doing it, Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that I can really appreciate about the Sonic Highways is if there's a thread of, hey, we could be the same old guys. We could do our best of tour, but we're looking for fresh. We're looking to create, and these are the things. But these guys are the master of power chords. They're the master of shapes. They're the masters of inversions when it comes to guitar playing. I mean, and all of that stuff going together. And they have. There's no question about this, though. Dave Grohl is the leader in charge of that band.
Oh yeah.
And people have learned their place, and they fall into space and place. And
yeah, Dave's definitely the head.
Oh my gosh. And I think the rest of them all figure out, hey, you know what? This isn't a bad ride.
No.
Yeah.
No, it I'm sure none of them would say, I wish I wouldn't have. No, I think Taylor knew that what he was looking for was some longevity as well. And not saying that Alanis wasn't, but I think you're right with Alanis was a solo artist who needed a band. And Dave was creating Foo Fighters that were, that yes, he was going to be the voice and he was going to be the head, but he also wanted those people with him.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Oh, man.
All right.
Good stuff.
It is good stuff. So considering, we kind of focused on two, bands somewhat, but I think it was because of the way that we saw it tied.
Yeah.
With Taylor going into Foo, and then the Foo with Nirvana and all that other, there's a lot of connections that reason why we landed on these two.
Yeah.
And yeah, Nirvana, was somewhat of a conversation, but just because of Dave.
Yeah, well, not to the in-depth, and we alluded to the conspiracy of the end of Kurt, but
right.
And if you're looking for more media to be able to take in, is it Echo Valley? Echo Canyon in California, man.
Yeah.
There's, and when you start drawing, that's the thing is like or Google rock and roll starts and all of the different players who played in different things, and just the bleed overs. But it's not surprising that we jump into the interconnectivity, especially in lieu of the heart and heaviness from Alanis to the life of Dave Grohl. I think the other thing too, if you're listening, if you're still with us now, just remember that what both bands have in common is that life isn't rainbows 100% of the time.
Right.
Out of difficulty, good things can happen. There is a hunger in humanity for people to be transparent enough to share the difficulty that they've survived. And so I think both both lead singers, have had life and parts of their life that they've had to overcome, and they've had to figure out how they're going to overcome it. So if you are still alive, I'm telling you, you're still an overcomer. Mm-hmm. And if there's torturous things in your past that you have not overcome, don't be afraid to become a survivor.
Right. Survival's good, and I agree. I would echo that as well. Like, it's from some of those times, those places of hurt that you can actually see, like, oh, like the stuff that is happening now is some of the good that's coming out of that.
Yeah.
Yep. And you see it in a lot of this art too. Music, art. It's that reflection. It's things that are coming out.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, and if you're wondering about life lessons and if Steve's learned any, I think I boiled it down. I make messes and I clean them up. That's pretty much all. I mean, if you're going to ask me, hey, Steve, what's a major key to your creativity? You know what? You got to be willing to make a mess. And you got to understand, out of a cultural courtesy for others in your life, you should clean them up.
Cleaning up messes.
Yep.
Sometimes created by you, sometimes created by others.
Well, I'm taking ownership for the ones I make.
That's a good goal. All right, everybody, all kinds of stuff you can be thinking about. We focused on this, but we also brought in a lot of things that you can start paying attention to, lyrics and not just the music, but what is it saying? And it's things to consider. You know, it's art to be able to take in, to enjoy, and then pass along.
Yeah, and if you want to, in the comments section, put down your favorite artist that we could do some research on, find some ties, and pull all of this together.
Right.
And for those who do have record players, on eBay, this whole Jagged is not going to hurt Alanis at all, because she's getting ready in 2022 to start a Jagged Little Pill tour. And on eBay, I found new vinyl, not from '95, but current 2021 pressed for $34. I was just looking in the wrong place.
Right. There you go.
And
so
quite frankly, it could be available.
Vinyl.
It could be available by this time. It's just when I was looking for it 2 weeks ago, it wasn't available. But all of this is getting wheels, momentum, and so there you go. And in the comments, put your favorite artist, and we'd love to do some research and be able to feature that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Highlight it. Bring it out.
All the highlights.
Let's celebrate it.
All my highlights are gray.
Mine are mostly there too.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been a delightful afternoon, and if you can think about it, take time, boil it down to 2 little points. Hey, you should listen to these guys. They've got a great overview on music with Alanis, not with her, but about
her.
About Alanis Morissette and Dave Grohl. Taylor Hawkins.
All right, everybody. Good to be here. Good to see you, even though you're mostly just seeing us. But take care.
All right. Bye, everybody.